A very good evening, respected participants, scholars, students, and distinguished guests. Myself, Shauradip Adhikari. On behalf of Modok Trainer Academy, it is my profound honor to welcome each one of you to today's enlightening webinar titled Unfurling the Pañcatantra Beyond the Machiavellian Label Towards Holistic Learning. We are truly grateful to all of you for taking the time to join us and for showing interest in a subject that encourages deeper reflection on India's classical intellectual traditions. The Panchatantra is often understood merely as a collection of clever, moral, or political stories. However, its richness lies in its layered exploration of ethics, human behavior, governance, education, and psychology. Today's webinar aims to move beyond simplified interpretations and to engage with the Panchatantra as a holistic learning system that remains relevant even in contemporary times. It gives me immense pleasure and privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker, respected Dr. Anindya Bandyopadhyay. Dr. Anindya Bandyopadhyay is currently serving as Assistant Professor in the Department of Sanskrit at the University of Kalyani, West Bengal. He has been associated with the University of Kalyani since 2015 and has made significant contributions to teaching, research, and academic mentoring in the field of Sanskrit studies. Dr. Bandyopadhyay completed his PhD from Jadavpur University in 2014. He is a scholar of Sanskrit literature with specialized academic interests in Dharmashastra, Arthashastra, ancient Indian legal systems, political and diplomatic thought, and classical narrative traditions such as the Panchatantra and Niti Shastra literature. His work carefully examines how ancient Indian texts integrate law, ethics, social responsibility, and practical wisdom. He has also guided and supervised doctoral research on important themes including Hindu law of inheritance, concepts of expiation in medieval Hindu theology, etc. His role as a mentor reflects his deep engagement with both traditional and modern academic inquiry. Most notably, Dr. Anindya Bandyopadhyay is the principal investigator of the research project titled Unfurling the Pañcatantra, Going Beyond the Machiavellian Label Towards Holistic Learning, funded by the Indian Knowledge Systems Division, Ministry of Education, Government of India. We are truly delighted to have Dr. Bandyopadhyay with us today. His wisdom combines textual depth, critical insight, and contemporary relevance, making complex ideas accessible and meaningful for all. Now, without further delay, I respectfully invite Dr. Anindya Bandyopadhyay to begin today's session. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Shauradip, for introducing me. Hope my presentation is visible to all of you, isn't it? And I am perfectly audible.
Everything is right, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So, Let me first express my deep gratitude to all the members of the Modak Training Academy for providing me with an opportunity to present my today's lecture. And as you um, uh, actually, this is a report of my ICAS project before this August gathering. So let's start. So let me begin with a story. Imagine Europe in the early 1800s. Prussia, what we now know as part of modern day Germany, was licking its wounds after a humiliating defeat by Napoleon's forces at the Battle of Jena in 1806. The loss was not just military, it was psychological. Prussian leaders began to ask a crucial questions. How do we rebuild a state that is disciplined, efficient, and loyal enough to never fail again? Their answer, not just stronger armies, but stronger schools. In the aftermath of defeat, the Prussian state turned its eyes towards education as a tool of national reconstruction. But it was not education for creativity or independent thought. It was education as statecraft. Think of it as the birth of a factory model of schooling. Every student or every student's a worker on an assembly line of loyalty, every teacher a supervisor, every classroom a miniature of national order. Led by reformer like Wilhelm von Humboldt, ironically a humanist who sought a balance between classical ideals and national goals, the Prussian state institutionalized a centralized, state controlled education system. Attendance was made compulsory. Teachers were trained not just in subjects, but in shaping characters. Schools were designed to install obedience, punctuality, discipline, and above all, loyalty to the state. This system had several distinct features. One is uniform curriculum, tightly controlled by the state, standardized testing to measure not just intelligence but conformity. Third is bureaucratic hierarchy, where teachers report to inspector and inspectors report to the ministry. And the last of all is moral instruction tailored not towards spiritual growth, but towards civic obedience. It was, in essence, a militarization of mind. The classroom was no longer a space of wonder or inquiry. It became a barracks of the brain. Students were expected not to ask why, but to memorize that, the what, and perform the how. Russia's education system became so efficient that other nations took notice. The model was soon exported across Europe and later inspired industrial age schooling in the United States. Horseman, the American educational reformer, visited Prussia in 1843 and returned with glowing reports. He praised the system's order, its results is its predictability, but the cost, the erosion of imagination, critical thought, and soulful learning. In time, what began as a reaction to military defeat evolved into a global model, one that saw education not as self discovery, but as state machinery. The ideal graduate was not a philosopher king or a creative sage, but a reliable clerk a good soldier or an obedient civil servant. The Prussian experiment in molding minds soon found an eager adopter in colonial India. Enter Thomas Babington Macaulay, armed with Enlightenment logic and imperial ambition, who viewed education not as a means of liberation but as a tool of governance. In his infamous Minutes on Indian Education, 1835, Macaulay did not merely critique indigenous knowledge system, he declared them null and void. Sanskrit and Persian language, in his view, were less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry school books of Europe. His aim to engineer an elite class, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinion, in morals, and in intellect. What emerged was not education, but a form of intellectual domestication. The colonial classroom became a laboratory of cultural reprogramming, where memorization replaced meditation, syllabi replaced shastra, and language itself became an instrument of all alienation. The consequences linger. Even today, much of India's educational landscape remain haunted by the architecture of that design. Standardized, exam-centric, compliance-driven, original thought struggles under the weight of evolutional greeds, creativity too often the casualty of conformity, learning once a path towards moksha or self realization is now frequently reduced to a scramble for marks, jobs, and prestige. In effect, we are still living inside the scaffolding of a system never meant to help us think deeply, but to help us serve efficiently. Today, we find ourselves in a crucial turning point. India is searching for her own educational soul once again. And in this search, we often overlook one of our oldest treasures, the Panchatantra, popularly mistaken as a book of diplomatic tricks, power politics, and Machiavellian strategy. Panchatantra is actually something far richer. It is, in fact, a profound manual of holistic learning, clothed in the skin of animal fable. It teaches not through commandments, but through conflict, not through syllabi, but through stories, not through passive memorization, but through lived insight and emotional engagement. This paper seeks to re-examine the Panchatantra not merely as a repository of the statecraft and strategic thinking, but as a pedagogical text rooted in Indian ideal of holistic education, that is, Sampurna Shiksha. By contrasting it with the imported Prussian Macaulay educational framework that still dominates much of Indian schooling today, I aim to unpack the philosophical foundation of modern Indian education and its colonial legacy, explore the vision of learning in Panchatantra as a narrative based, emotionally rich, ethnically engaged, and spiritually anchored model of education, and last of all, argue for a revival of classical Indian educational principle that prioritize self knowledge, that is, Atma Jnana, inner freedom, and moral imagination over mechanical skill and market readiness. In doing so, I hope to contribute to the ongoing conversation about building and education system that is not just for India, but of India, an education system that draws from her own well springs of wisdom rather than imitating borrowed blueprint. Um, Within the Indian knowledge tradition, the concept of shiksha and vidya offer a radically different version of learning than what modern schooling typically provides. Etymologically and philosophically distinct from the Western idea of education as mere instruction or skill building. These terms emerge from deeper metaphysical and ethical frameworks. Shiksha derived from the verbal root shiks, which means to discipline, to train, is traditionally one of the six Vedangas concerned with phonetic intonation and the cultivation of clarity of speech and thought. But it is more than linguistics precision. It is about inner refinement, ethical tonality, and disciplined conduct. On the other hand, Vidya, rooted in vid, uh, to know, which means to know, to realize, points not to data acquisition, but to transformative knowledge, the kind that illumines illumines and liberates. As a as the Vishnu Purana declares, Ya Vidya, Sa Vidya, Ya Vimukta, the popular one, true knowledge is that which leads to liberation. Over time, the semantic boundaries between the terms shiksha and vidya have gradually blurred, leading to their near synonymous use in later period. While originally distinct, shiksha emphasizing disciplined training and phonetic precisions, and vidya indicating transformative liberatory knowledge. The two came to be used interchangeably in many contexts. This convergence, however, does not erase their deeper philosophical roots. A compelling example of this profound vision of Shiksha, not as rote learning, but as inner cultivation, is found in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshashtaka. Here, learning is not defined by academic accomplishment, but by the refinement of consciousness itself, making a shift from informational acquisition to spiritual and ethical elevation. In this radiant Sikshashtaka, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does not merely recite a verse, he channels a sacred utterance, a prayer breathed from the depth of spiritual longing. That is, Cheto Darpanamarjanam, Bhavamaha Davagni Nirvapanam, Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam, Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. This verse redefines education at its highest plane, not as the accumulation of facts, but as the cleansing of mind's mirror, clearing away the dust of illusion. It soothes the soul like rain upon a forest fire, extinguishing the heat of worldly turmoil. Like moonlight awakening the night blooming lotus, it brings forth the unfolding of inner virtues. Most strikingly, Vidya is personified here as a living bride, graceful, luminous, and brought to light through the breath of meaningful learning. This poetic metaphor is far removed from modern metrics of education, such as exam scores or institutional ranking. Here, Siksha is not a tool for professional utility, but the sacred process of inner awakening, ethical, emotional, and spiritual. It reorients the learner from the outer world of conformity to the inner world of clarity. The mirror of the chitta, obscured by ego, fear, and distraction, is, is polished so that it may reflect truth. This concept of education emphasizes that knowledge, that is vidya, and moral understanding, that is mullavodha, cannot be separated, and learning is about developing the whole person, not just preparing individual for jobs. It contrasts sharply with the mechanical compliance-based education system of Prussian and Macaulay, which focus on producing workers rather than nurturing well-rounded individuals. This view is far removed from the modern approach of education as a means to obtain credentials of serve practical utility. Today, these classical views of education encourage us to rethink what education should be. It's not about merely delivering content or preparing for exam. It's about shaping character, preparing the inner self, and promoting personal transformation. Before I delve into the core to today's paper, let me begin with a simple yet essential question: why the Panchatantra? Among the vast ocean of Sanskrit treatises and Buddhist scholastic texts, why have I chosen to focus on this particular text? One that at first glance appears more about talking animals than about formal pedagogy. Here is why. Uh, Most ancient texts stayed where they were born, rooted in monasteries, guarded in temples, sealed in royal archives. But the Panchatantra, it broke free, it traveled, it transformed, and most importantly, it sustained. A book with no single author, no copyright, no university affiliation, quietly journeyed across the world. It crossed deserts and dynasties. A Zoroastrian physician Bourzoin risked his life to bring it to the Persian court. It was reborn in Arabic as Kalia wa Dimna, found new life in Hebrew, and finally wore the grab of Hebel in Europe. Today, its echoes can still be heard, disguised as bedtime tales, leadership lessons, and even diplomatic wisdom. Now, the question is, what gave this humble collection of stories such power? Unlike many classical texts, the Panchatantra never lectured, it never threatened, it never demanded, it invited. It drew you in with curiosity. It taught not by instruction, but by insight. No dogma, only dilemmas. No rigidity, only reflection. Its characters, crows, lions, jackals, turtles, were not there to entertain children. They were designed to awaken adults. They molded strategy, foresight, and ethics. Their world was unpredictable, just like ours, and their dilemmas were not ancient, they were timeless. The genius of Panchatantra lies in its belief that education is not about producing subjects, it about shaping sovereign thinking mind. So, in an age where our classroom often resembles factories, churning out degrees, chasing scores, the Panchatantra reminds us that education can be something else, something deeper, something more human. It offers a model of shiksha that is emotional, ethical, dialogic, and alive. It does not ask you to memorize. It asks you to listen, to feel, to understand. This paper then does not approach the Panchatantra as a relic of the past. It treats it as a living invitation, an invitation to reimagine Indian pedagogy not as a colonial inheritance, but as an indigenous wisdom tradition, one that began as the Panchatantra itself began, not with a syllabus, but with a crisis, a kingdom in disarray, some confused princess, and a sage who believed that the right story told the right way could rebuild a nation. And perhaps it still can. The Panchatantra offers often mischaracterized as a mere collection of fables. It is, in fact, a profound repository of strategic wisdom, psychological insight, and political realism. Its narratives do not merely aim to entertain, they are designed to educate, to shape minds that are aware, discerning, and prepared to navigate a complex world. At its core, the Panchatantra explores the intricate dynamics of ambition, rivalry, power, and survival. Focuses not confined to royal courts or elite circles. These focuses uh, permeates every layer of human experience: politics, corporate life, personal relationship, and even family system. The Panchatantra begins by asserting that politics, broadly understood as the negotiation of interest and power, is not a specialized field for the few, but a condition of life for all. To those who claim that politics has no relevance to their personal life, the Panchatantra offers a striking reminder. Yes, is the Sanskrit text of Mitra Veda section, that is Attung Banchati Shambhavo Ganapati Raku Hudartha. Funny, I am not going to recite the whole poem, whole sloka, but here is the translation where it said that even in Shiva's, Lord Shiva's divine adobe, the snake that coils around his neck eyes Ganesha's mouth. It wants to eat. The Kartikeya's peacock hunts that snake, and the lion of Devi Durga stalks the peacock with hunger. If conflicts brews in the house of gods himself, how can the world below even be free of rivalry? This verse offers a vivid description of conflict nested even within the divine. Rivalry is not an irregularity, it is a structural feature of existence. The verse challenges the common tendency to see conflict as undesirable or external. Instead, it positions politics as an external existential reality, demanding awareness and response, not avoidance. And this brings us to a deeper insight. While many seek to remain apolitical in today's world, the Panchatantra cautions against such detachment. In fact, political agreement, negotiation, and strategy are not elite skill. They are essential life tools. From navigating personal dilemmas to managing institutions and states, the understanding of human motivations and power structure is critical. Staying out of politics and politics, the text warns, is not neutrality, but a symptom of naivety, a lack of experience and sensitivity. This is precisely why the Panchatantra must be revived as a cornerstone of holistic education. It teaches us that the world is not binary, nor always moral or ideal. It is layered, strategic, and often morally ambiguous. One must cultivate awareness of deception, betrayal, manipulation, and the strategies needed to respond wisely and ethically. Consider the very first story of the Mitraveda section of Panchatantra. It does not open in a royal court or a grand assembly, but within the quiet, introspective night of a businessman named Vardhamana. This narrative choice is far from incidental. His name Vardhamana, the means the ever-growing, evokes not greed but aspiration, human striving towards stability, success, and meaning. Lying awake at night, not out of fear, but due to reflection, he, Vardhamana, wonders that nahi tad vidyate kinchit yadarthena nasidyati. There is nothing, there is indeed nothing in this world that cannot be accomplished through wealth. This is not a capitalist endorsement, but a philosophical realism. It is in the Indian framework of Purushartha, that is Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha. Artha is not a vice, but a necessity. Wealth is the ground on which both Dharma and Kama stand. Without economic agency, even virtue becomes ineffective. As another verse elaborates, that just as river flow from mountain, all human activities flow from those who possesses wealth. Even respect and social recognition flow wealth. Here is another shloka is that pujyate yad apujyopi yad agamyopi gamyate vandate yad adam avandopi saprabhavo dhanasya. Even the aged appears youthful if they possess wealth, while the poor, though young, are treated as old. The worthy, the unworthy are worshipped, the inaccessible are approached, and the unpraiseworthy are praised. That is the power of the wealth. This is not skepticism, but realism. The text recognizes that while character is crucial, visibility and agency come with resonance. Such reflections lead us to a vital educational insight. Righteousness needs resources to function effectively. An ethical individual who lacks economic independence is often powerless to help others, influence systems, or even uphold their own principles. Hence, Vardhamana is not depicted as greedy, he is prudent, self aware, and forward thinking. In contemporary term, this is akin to instrumental education, learning that not only impart knowledge but equips individual to an meaningfully in the world. The Panchatantra thus encourages an education that merges moral clarity with strategic competence. Ultimately, the Panchatantra opposes an Indian Panchatantra proposes an Indian model of holistic education, one that emphasizes strategic thinking without cynicism, ethical conduct without naivety, emotional intelligence alongside intellectual acumen, economic independence as the foundation of dharma. In an era overwhelmed by idealism on one side and materialism on the other, the Panchatantra offers a balanced third path, practical idealism. It tells us that to lead a life of purpose, one must not only desire to do good, but also acquire the means to do so effectively. In reviving this ancient text within our educational framework, we are not looking backward, we are reclaiming a sophisticated version of learning that prepares individuals to live with wisdom, dignity, and capability in an increasingly complex world. In reviving the ancient education model rooted in holistic wisdom, we must move beyond the tendency to view ancient tales as mere moral stories for children, what I said earlier. The Panchatantra is, in fact, a sophisticated manual for real politic, psychological insight, and ethical reasoning. Its layered pedagogy delivered through narrative was crafted not only to inform but to train the mind in discriminant um, adaptability and strategic acumen. The stories were taught orally with a teacher, that is guru, interpreting the subtext of each disciple. This is what made traditional Indian learning so effective. It was intimate, interpretive, and practical. In my lecture today, I focus on three tales from different tantras of the Panchatantra to demonstrate how these narratives offers lesson in critical thinking, deception detection, leadership, and ethical judgment, skills vital for any holistic education. Drawn from Kakalukiam, the section on war and peace, that is the third part of the Panchatantra, this story presents a seemingly simple con trick. Three cunning men deceive a poor Brahmin into abandoning his goat through coordinated, repetitive lies. Each man, stationed at intervals, insists the goat is a dog. Eventually, the Brahmin, doubting his own perception, abandons the animal. At first reading, the narrative may strike us as a straightforward lesson in naivety. But Vishnu Sharman's deeper message lies in the collaborative nature of cunning, the exploitation of perception, and the power of strategic communication. The tale illustrates the mechanics of group manipulation, a phenomenon as relevant to ancient statecraft as it is to modern media psychology. From an interdisciplinary standpoint, this story anticipates the principles of modern propaganda, gaslighting, and psychological manipulation prevalent in today's political and media discourse. As in Goebbels' notorious doctrine of big lie, repeated deception is shown here as an effective tool of persuasion. The story also anticipates gaslighting, a psychological tactic where repeated false assertion lead individuals to question their own reality. Thus, through this narrative, Vishnu Sharman invites his students to consider not only the ethics of strategy, but also the fragility of truth when repeatedly challenged. It is a powerful example of how education must train individuals to remain alert in a world full of deception, making it indispensable for a holistic and critical education. The second story from Labdha Pranasham, the section on losing what has been gained, follows a potter named Yudhishthira who accidentally gains status as a warrior due to a scar on his forehead. But when asked about its origin, he honestly reveals it came from falling drunk on a shred of pottery. The king feels deceived, expels him. Here, Vishnu Sharman warns against a rigid, unthinking commitment of truth that disregards context and consequences. In doing so, he introduces a paradox central to both leadership and life, the tension between integrity and pragmatism. The moral is not to abandon honesty, but to approach it with sensitivity. This narrative pushes us to think of honesty not as a static virtue, but as a strategic choice. In real life governance, diplomacy, or even personal survival, truth telling must be intelligent, timely, and purposeful. A holistic education, as envisioned in traditional India, was not about teaching obedience to virtue. It was about teaching the application of virtue within complex, shifting realities. In a more modern context, this story aligns with what we now call strategic communication or a calibrated honesty. It is also a commentary on leadership evolution, how rulers should question deeper than appearances, but also how systems can foster or destroy trust depending on how truth is treated. The third story I wish to explore is the Ekodara Prithagriva Bharunda Pakshina Katha, taken from the concluding section of the Panchatantra, namely Aparikshita Karakam, which means on hasty action. At first glance, this might appear to be a peculiar fable about a two-headed bird. However, like many Panchatantra stories, it serves as a profound allegory, far richer in meaning than it may seem. The story tells of a unique bird, one with two heads but a single body. The first head, upon tasting a sweet fruit that is Amritaphala, refuses to share it with the second, rationalizing that since the body is shared, the benefit will be mutual. The second head, hurt by this Daniel, consumes poison in retaliation, ultimately killing both. This tragic story speaks not only to interpersonal dynamics but to the foundational ethics of collective decision making. It acts like a mirror, showing how institutions, communities, and even nations thought they may seem united are often divided from within by ego, competition, and poor communication. From an administrative and political standpoint, this story is invaluable. It underscores three crucial aspects of good governance, that is, the unity of purpose. When leaders or governing bodies have different motives or unresolved conflicts, the entire system of governance suffers. The bird's downfall symbolizes how states collapse because of internal struggles. Second is empathy and emotional intelligence. The first head, selfishness, is not merely a question of ethics, it is a strategic error. When a leader dismisses the concerns of those around him, whether whether constituents or colleagues, he spreads distrust and discontent, laying the groundwork for internal sabotage or often revolt. And the third is communicating and shared responsibility, communication and share responsibility. The refusal to share information or resources in a cooperative body is a failure of basic communication. This story champions participative leadership where decision must be transparent, inclusive, and grounded in mutual respect. Hence, the Varunda Pakshin becomes a metaphor for every leadership team, every governing body, every collective effort that fails due to lack of alignment and empathy. Through this story and others, we have seen, be it psychological manipulation in Dhurta Brahmana Chagakatha, the paradox of truth in Yudhishthira Kumbhakara Katha, or now the fatal miscommunication in the Bharunda Pakshin, what becomes evident is Panchatantra is not just merely a text of niti, I mean strategy, but one of viveka, discernment. These stories, far from being Machiavellian, demonstrate the consequences of foolishness, ego, haste, and unprincipled behavior. They functioned as ethical and psychological case studies. The so called villains in these tales are not models to be imitated, but warning signs, literally simultaneous, that help readers, especially young learners, to explore complex decision making in a safe, symbolic realm. This is why I argue that the Panchatantra should be at the heart of any education that seeks to be truly holistic. It teaches how to understand the mind of others. Second is how to anticipate consequences, how to lead and how to follow, how to navigate a world where truth, strategy, and morality often overlap. In reviving this text for our time, not as a collection of human tales, but as a rich manual of critical intelligence, we not only reconnect our own cultural heritage, but also cultivate the very skills our modern learners need most, that is flexibility, empathy, strategic foresight, and moral wisdom. And Machiavelli's prince was born in a time of chaos during the bloody Italian wars, when rulers survived by lying, cheating, and betraying. In that world, being good was dangerous. Power came at the cost of virtue. It was a time when the sword often spoke louder than the soul. But the Panchatantra came from a very different place. It was not written in a royal court or on battlefield. It was born in quiet forest schools where teachers spoke in stories and student listens under the trees. It came from a land where wisdom mattered more than war. If the prince of Machiavelli teaches how to control others, the Panchatantra teaches how to control yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real kind of power. Today, as we see, democrat, uh, today as we see democracy's struggles with shouting matches, fake newses, and growing divisions, we need something deeper. The Panchatantra can guide us back. It does not celebrate deceit. It shows what happens when we act out of pride, trust the wrong person, or make hasty choices. Its characters are not heroes to follow, they are examples to learn from. Each story holds a mirror to the don'ts, guiding us to choose right over wrong in the true paths of life. These stories are like early versions of classroom role play. They let learners explore real life situations safely, helping them build the judgment and clarity they will need in the day to day lives. For young minds, especially, the Panchatantra teaches how to think smartly, act wisely, and stay balanced in a complicated world. Bringing the Panchatantra back into our classroom is not about going backwards, it's about returning to a deeper idea of education. Vishnu Sharma didn't write fairy tales. He creates a guide for leadership, decision making, and ethical living. So we talk about so when we talk about unfurling Panchatantra, we must move past the shallow level of Machiavellianism. These are not stories of cold manipulation, but tools for complete learning, that is, Sampurna Shiksha, where logic matters, empathy, and strategy works together with values. Today, as the world grows louder, faster, and more divided, these quiet tales still speak, reminding us that education is not just about filling heads, but about forming hearts. It reminds us the greatest leaders in history were not the ones who ruled over people, but the ones who ruled over their own minds and hearts. Because in the end, the Panchatantra is not just about how to survive, it's about how to live wisely, fully, and with grace. So, in the end, it is written in the Panchatantra, Adhiteya idang nityam niti shastram srinoti cha na parabhavam apnoti shakradapi kadachana. One who regularly studies or listens to this treatise on ethics, that is Panchatantra, cannot be defeated in political diplomacy, not even by the king of the gods, that is Indra. Thank you very much.